Lesson 3, Working with Copy Groups. Copy groups are contained in the management class and provide the most detailed level of your policy management. There's a backup copy group, an archive copy group. You can have both, one, or neither. All copy groups are named standard. So only the standard copy groups can be used. Using the command line to define a copy group is shown here. You're going to define copy group, name of your domain name, set name, management class name. These are all required parameters. Standard is the name of your copy group. Type equals backup or archive, and destination is the destination pool. Now remember, for our standard policy that's predefined, our destination pool is backup pool for backups, archive pool for archives. So if you're wanting to use a different destination pool, this is where you would set it, in your backup copy group. Here we're using disk pool. This is a primary random access storage pool that we have created. Now for your type equals backup or archive, by default type equals backup. So you don't really need to specify the type equals backup here. If you're doing an archive copy group, you definitely have to put type equals archive. When you're using the define copy group command, these are your parameters. Domain name is required. Policy set name is required. Class name is required. This is your management class. You don't really need to specify standard as the name of your copy group because that's what it will be called. This is the default. Type, by default, it means backup. So it's optional for backup, required for archive. Destination is required. The default is going to be archive pool or backup pool. Frequency, which would be followed by a value, is an optional parameter. It's the number of minimum interval in days between successive backups. Again, this is optional. Another optional parameter is mode. This is whether or not a file is backed up based on changes made to the file. By default, the value is modified. Modified means you will do an incremental backup when the file has changed, when it has been modified. The other option is absolute. This means you will always be doing a backup whether or not it was modified. Serialization, another optional value. We have the value of shared static, which says TSM is going to back up the file and directory only if it's not being modified during the backup. Other options are static, shared dynamic, and dynamic. Parameters that are specific for archive copy groups. Type equals archive. Retver, which is the number of days you're going to keep an archive copy. By default, it's 365. You can also specify a different value or no limit. Here's where if you have a file that needs to be retained for 7 years, you would set it here with the retver. ReadyKnit, another optional parameter, specifies the trigger for initiating the retention time that is based on creation, or the other option is event. And then retmin is the minimum number of days to keep an archive copy after it has been archived. Default, 365 days. This is a list of parameters that are specific for defining backup copy groups. Ver exists. This is optional. The default would be 2. This means the maximum number of backup versions to retain for files that are currently still on the client system. So you would have 2 copies. One would be the active version, one would be the inactive version. Ver delete, the number of versions you're going to retain after the file is deleted from the client system. By default, this is 1. You can also reset this to another value. Ret extra, the number of days to retain a backup version after it becomes inactive. An active version is the latest copy. Inactive was what you backed up previously. The default value is 30 days. That means you'll retain your active copy and the last inactive copy for 30 days, as long as the file is still on the client system. When the client system file is deleted, you'll be using the read-only parameter. This is the number of days to retain the last backup version of a file once it's been deleted. By default, it's 60. Now, these are all optional parameters. The default values are set in the standard group, the predefined policy standard. You can use your Backup Archive GUI include-exclude list to help manage which files are being backed up. And we'll go into this in Unit 8. Know that you can include files to be backed up and exclude files from being backed up with your client options. Policy domain grace periods are a type of safety net. If for some reason your management class no longer existed or no longer contained backup or archive copy groups, you would rely on the retention grace period. You can reset this with the back retention for backup or arc retention for archive. To assign your default management class, you would use the command assign def management class. In this case, we're saying we want the Unix policy domain, lab policy set, and Unix MC management class. You can also do this in the Administration Center. Remember when we saw the Manage Changes and we activated our policy set? This is how you do it with the command line. First, you validate your policy set, the name of the policy domain, the name of the policy set, then you activate it. Once it's activated, you can use it. Remember, only policy sets called active can be used. This is how you make them active. So we've created our policy. We have our policy domain, policy set, management classes. How do we identify which clients use which policy? We do this by binding the files to a management class. You can do this with an include statement. You can bind files to a management class using the dir MC option when you're backing up a file. So as you're backing it up, you can change where it's going to associate. And you can bind to the default management class active policy set when a user does not bind a file to another management class. So by default, you would be using your standard. Occasionally, you may need to rebind or change your management class. For example, if an administrator activates a policy that does not have a management class or assigns a client node to a different policy and does not have a management class with the same name, or a user changes the management class assigned to a file by using a different management class in include-exclude. In these cases, you could rebind to a new management class. You can copy and update a policy domain. For example, you want to have a policy domain that's very similar to one you already have. Do a copy domain. The command is copy domain, the original domain name, followed by the new domain name. You can also update the new domain with your description, back retention, archive retention, and active destination. So the command here, the example, update domain, new domain, which is the name of our new domain, description, it's our new policy. We can set a backup retention value, an archive retention value, and an active destination. In this case, we're saying active destination is active data pool. This is what you would do, the active destination, for creating policies that would have active data pools. Active destination is the name of your active data pool. You can also export policies from one server to another.